Let's get into today's episode of Why We Succeed. What's going on, and welcome to a new episode of Why We Succeed. I'm Immanuel, and today I'm joined by a very special guest, none other than my man, Frank Rich. What's going on, Frank?
What's up, brother? Excited to be here, man. Thank you for having me.
Oh, man, I'm excited to have you on here, man. Frank, you know, we've had the opportunity to work and speak with each other in the past, and having you come on Why We Succeed, I'm super excited because I want to dive in, learn about your journey. All of the people who click, they know that you've been able to generate millions of dollars on online sales. But beyond that, I want to get into your story. I want them to know you and how you were able to actually do that. But before we get into it, I'm curious, man, having generated $1 million in sales, what did that feel like? Like at the end of the day, where you are today, how does that make you feel?
Oh, man. It's just the beginning, man. That metric is important to some.
Right.
I look at revenue numbers, and I look at cash, and, I look at kind of the financial side of business a little bit different than I did, coming up. Like, when I first got started in business, that was kind of the goal. Like, hit a $10,000 month,
right.
have a $10,000 day,
yes.
have an $80,000 month,
wow.
have a $500,000 year. Like those were goals.
Right.
For me back then. And, hitting those goals was great. You check things off, and you're measuring your success, and you're hitting the next stratosphere. Today, I'm not driven by numbers the same way that I was anymore. My focus has shifted to more impact than anything.
Right.
So when I talk about numbers and when I really look at data, which we are a big, we're a very data driven business, I look at it more as like a scorecard. A way to just maybe, measure the success. And yeah, but, saying I generated $1 million. Yeah, it feels good. It feels a lot better is having $1 million in the bank.
Right.
which I haven't hit that yet. So a lot of people get wrapped up in like, oh, your business did $1 million. Well, what was the net return on that? If it cost you $950,000 to generate $1 million in business, you really only had a $50,000
right.
business, and you can go work at, nowadays you can almost go get a job anywhere and make almost $50,000. So I think a lot of people get wrapped up in that number. For me, it's like the goal is, $1 million cash in the bank. And when I hit that number, I'll be happy to come back on and do a second round two of what it feels like.
Man, you're always welcome, Frank. Man, I love that. And with that being said, I think one of the things that we know is that people define success differently. And I want to know, how do you define success?
Today, success for me is alignment. Are the actions that I take aligned with the words that I say? And is that aligned with the thoughts that I think? I think too many people get wrapped up in chasing, like we talked about, chasing hitting $1 million. Well, if you had to be shady, if you had to go out of alignment with your values and principles that you live your life by, I don't think that person is a success. So for me, is everything I'm doing aligned with the man that God created me to be? And if that checks off, I know the numbers will follow. It's, it just may take longer for some than others. But true success today is alignment.
I love that, man. And I'll be honest, I've never heard anybody give that definition for success, but I love it because I'm a huge proponent of alignment. I think with anything that I do in life, alignment is so important, especially when other people are involved, because I'm sure you're aware, there's a lot of, how can I frame this? I think we have a evolving scam culture around. There's a lot of people out nowadays taking advantage of people in a lot of different ways, whether it's online influencers or even businesses that people are starting with the sole purpose of, making as much money as they can and then running off and leaving other people high and dry. And it's sad because I think the character of a person as well as the character of a business that we as individuals start is extremely important. And I'm so glad that you hit on that, man.
Yeah, that's great, man. And as somebody that's been in the online marketing space, for 4 or 5 years now, like that's a big part of, what we have to deal with and face, because there is such a high percentage of people out there on the internet that are just running, scams for lack of a better word. So unfortunate, the actions of others play a role in the perception that that we have. So a lot of what we do is very
Mhm.
value driven on the front end. We want to give away as much value as we
I
possibly
love
can,
that.
just to create that reciprocity, to create that know, like, trust factor with our audience. But yeah, I'm right in line there. There were points, in one of my previous companies where we
Mhm.
were purely focused on chasing numbers and doing
Mm,
things for, squeeze as much profit that we possibly could. And
right.
those were some of my best, most successful financial years, in terms of what
Mhm.
we brought in. But at the end of the day, if I wasn't happy with who I was, like, all the money in the world isn't going to change how you
Right.
feel about yourself.
Right. Right. Wow, that's so important because you know how I'm sure you've heard people talk about is like when they ask people who've done these things, like, how do you sleep at night? And that's where conscience plays a role, right?
Yeah.
Thankfully, the majority of us have a conscience. And, even if somebody may dibble and dabble in some things that are not necessarily the best practices, at some point they'll be like, wow, like I'm having a hard time sleeping. And,
Yeah.
maybe I need to straighten things out. But then we know that there is a small percentage of people out in the world where they don't, I want to say almost to a certain extent, they don't have a conscience, or, chemically, they just aren't inclined to have empathy for other people. And thankfully, that's rare. But, for us that do have that conscience, it's good for us to have that self check, and like you being a man of faith, also having that aspect too, where it kind of keeps
Mhm.
us in line, not just with how we treat our customers, but with how we desire to be as individuals and how we want to look at God and, come before him.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would probably challenge you that every human being has a conscience.
Yeah.
There's a small percentage that is maybe ignoring the signs that
Mm,
it's telling them,
yeah.
but we all have that, internal voice in our head of when we know something is right or wrong. And yeah, unfortunately, there is a percentage of people that just, do whatever they feel, or whatever
Right.
makes them feel good.
Yeah.
And that's, it's a society
Feelings.
issue that we're having to face.
And that's no shade at feelings, right? Feelings play a role, but once it becomes a justification or an excuse, then it's like, oh man, yo, you just copping out.
Yeah, yeah.
So I'm curious, Frank, when you look back at your journey and how it started, did you always see yourself as a business owner? Did you always know that was going to be something that you would do?
100%. I have that Gary V, kind of classic story growing up, so
Hmm.
for me growing up, I was, raised in a, middle to, lower middle class family, so we never
Hmm.
went like truly without, but from a very early age, I was able to see the difference between those that have, and
Hmm.
those that don't. And,
Right.
and just being exposed to, um, I guess, success from the outside from a very, young age, I started to connect
Right.
the dots. But yeah, if you go back to, elementary school, I was a kid that was slinging, candy on the back of the bus,
I was that
looking at
guy
every
too.
opportunity. Yeah, looking at every opportunity, to set up, set up a lemonade stand out in front of the
Right.
house. Still to this day, I have a jersey that I still wear. It's a
Hmm.
Jordan jersey from the '97 season, which was the 50th
Wow.
anniversary of the Bulls. It was, and I remember this because it was the only year that the NBA had the gold Jerry West logo on it. So I
Mm.
was about 13 around that
Hmm.
time. And like I said, I wasn't poor, but we just had enough. But anything
Yeah.
extra, like, we had to come up with the money. So I really
Mm.
wanted this jersey. I was a huge Bulls fan. It was,
Yeah.
it was coming out. I knew the date. It was the black Bulls with the red,
With the
the
wear
red
pitch. Oh,
pinstripe,
that's the
the red
one, man.
pinstripe,
That
and
one
the
is
gold,
classic.
the gold Jerry West logo. But it was about $300, and $300
Wow.
for, for a 13-year-old kid. It's
And
like,
that's
that's a
back
lot more than
then, right?
a lot
Think
more than
about
your
that.
your
Man.
allowance is gonna pay for. So even back
Mhm.
then, man, I knew that, through, if I worked hard enough, and so I
Mhm.
took dad's lawnmower and I just knocked on people's doors.
Wow.
Literally, like, I spent my weekends looking at the grass. The grass is longer than it's supposed to be, and I said,
Mhm.
hey, I'm trying to raise some money for this. Would you,
Yeah.
would you like me to mow and weed eat the grass for 15, $20, what I was charging
Yeah.
back then? Nowadays that stuff doesn't work because the landscaping is a, multi-billion-dollar industry. I actually interviewed
Right.
a guy on my podcast. Companies doing
Mhm.
20 million a year just cutting grass. It's crazy.
Wow.
But that was me, man. So yeah, I always knew, when you're asked in school, what do you want to be growing
Mhm.
up? It wasn't doctor or lawyer or
Yeah.
teacher. It was business owner. I didn't know what the
That's
business
amazing.
was going to be, but I knew from a very
Mhm.
young age that I wanted to be in charge. I wanted to be the one calling the shots, and I wanted to be the
Right.
one creating my own success.
Thank you so much for tuning in to today's episode of Why We Succeed. If you value relationships and believe they are the true key to success, be sure to subscribe. To watch this full discussion and gain access to exclusive content, Join our Patreon today. The link is in the description. Thank you, and we'll catch you on the next episode.